Good evening. My name is Katrina Ruggless. I am the Vice President of the Winton Woods City School District Board of Education, sitting in for President Dr. Johnson. It is 6:30 p.m. on Monday, September 28th, 2020, and I now call the Winton Woods City School District meeting to order. But before we get started, to ensure the safety of all attendees, masks are required for all attendees unless speaking. In this case, if you're speaking, we have made provisions for speakers to be socially distanced beyond the 6-foot recommendation. Should our guests need a mask break, we ask that you excuse yourself to do so. Board members, should you need a mask break, please let me know and we'll take a brief recess. With that said, let's move to 1.02 and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Cupoletti.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Cupoletti. Mr. Seymour, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Birdie? Present. Dr. Cupoletti?
Present.
Mr. McGowan?
Present.
Mrs. Ruggless?
Present.
And Dr. Johnson is absent. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 2.01, District Honors, Recognitions, Gifts, and Introductions. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam Vice President. The Winton Woods City Schools Board of Education would like to express its deep appreciation to the following district nurses who have spent much time and effort during the summer to help ensure our students and staff are safe. And I'd like to call them up one at a time, and there will be someone presenting the awards over to the podium to my right. These are awards based on the eternal flame that our partner in education has actually prepared. So we appreciate you guys. Thank you for everything that you've done and that you continue to do with all the temp checks. And the first name is Jeanette Goins. Is she here tonight? Okay. The next award goes to Miss Lisa Litt. Next one is Miss Kimberly Morris. Miss Erin Lemaster. Juanita Russell. And finally, Marilyn Terry.
This is an honor and a pleasure to be acknowledged by the district. Myself and the rest of the nursing department, we feel like, coronavirus came out to try to attack us, but we have turned it around to use it as a platform to educate our community. And just to sum that up, a lot of our students did not have relationships with physicians in the community, didn't have primary care doctors, but now because of our education and us making them go to the doctor, they have now established a medical home. So that's one thing that we're really proud of that we've done for the Winton Woods City School District. But again, I thank you. We appreciate you. We love what we do. and we are happy to continue to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. So can you introduce the nurse that just came in?
Yes, we have Kimberly Morris is our school nurse. Lisa at the, what's? Intermediate and Primary North. Lisa Lip has been with us for 27 years. And Jeanette Goins is at the high school. And I just want to say to the board members that these ladies have been wonderful. They have taken the lead with all of our contacts to the CDC with suspected cases, confirmed cases, and all of the unknowns that go with COVID-19. And they have really been a godsend because they have really kept us informed and helped educate us and kept us calm. So thank you very much, all of you.
And just working with these ladies almost on a daily basis. We're either chatting on the phone, we're meeting with Hamilton County Health Department, as well as CDC. They are following all the CDC protocols as well as the county's health department. So we continue to meet almost on a daily basis through video chat, through telephone conference calls. These ladies are on top of it. So we love to recognize them today, but every day they are really, really out in the trenches. And I just want to say we support you and thank you for everything that you're doing for the district.
Mrs. Denny, there was going to be a video, but we're going to hold that for now and present that at the end. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, nurses. We really do appreciate all that you are doing. There's so much that's going on, and I'm sure that we have no idea of all of the things that you have to, that's in front of you. My daughter is a nurse and is a graduate of the Winton Woods City School District, so I have some idea of how that works. So thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 3.01, which is a recess. So at this time, we will take a 5-minute recess. Did I hit the button? Welcome back from our recess. The next item on our agenda is agenda item 4.01, public comments. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education to conduct the business of the school district. Because the board desires to hear from the community, we have allotted time for our guests to speak. Please note that this time is to share information, be it only to inform the board or for board consideration of a specific action. However, because we have several items on the agenda, we have allowed a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker and for a total of 1 hour per board policy 0169.1. That said, I've asked Mr. Birdie to be a timekeeper should we have any public comments. And Mr. Seymour, do we have any? Okay, we have Ms. Monica Parsley. Welcome. Would you take the podium and share your comments?
I hope you don't mind. I have to remove some of my uniform. Hi, my name is Monica Parsley. I teach 6th grade at Winton Intermediate School. So my concerns are basically with the safety of the buildings and concerns the students coming back. At this time, I think because of the hard work put in by the teachers in every building, we can make this sudden jump into hybrid learning work. But my concerns lie more with what was outlined in the superintendent's letter to get all blended students back in the school 5 days a week. When setting up my classroom today personally, I was only able to safely fit 6 feet apart, 9 desks, and a teacher desk in my classroom. So I was just concerned about how I can meet the needs of 14 students in one classroom and also protect them and keep them safe at the same time.
Thank you, Ms. Parsley. This, again, this is a time for you to share your concerns for consideration of the board. We have heard you, and we will definitely follow up, and I'm sure this is something that Mr. Smith will follow up with you on. Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Seeing as none, we will move on to agenda item 5.01, which is comments from the Winton Woods Teachers Association. Do we have a representative here from the Winton Woods Teacher Association?
Thank you very much. On behalf of Winton Woods Teachers Association, we appreciate you hearing us, and we have sent the administration emails with our concerns about current events, and we're just waiting for their response. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, so I'll say Miss Jerry.
We have it. We have her name.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is agenda item 5.02, the Ohio Association of Public School Employees. And I see Ms. Ferguson is in place.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Madam Vice President, Superintendent Smith, board members. I just wanted to say good evening tonight, and it's nice to see everyone. I'm glad that we're all safe. I hope we all stay safe. I wanted to address the issue of the labor meetings that we've been having with Superintendent Smith, Ms. Wilson, and Mr. Denny. I think they've been going marvelous. They have addressed all the issues in which OC members have brought to the table. And at this point in time, I just want to say thank you for listening to us and trying to address all issues that was brought to the table. I just want to say thank you, and I wish everyone stays safe, and go Warriors.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. And thank you to Mr. Smith and his staff for working with the OPC organization. The next item on the agenda is 6.01, the approval of the minutes. Board, unless you see any necessary changes, a motion is in order.
Ms. Ruglis, excuse me. Before we go to 6.01, I would encourage the members of the Teachers Association as well as OPC to stay for the entire meeting if you can, because the pandemic experts that we talked to you about in our letters and also in person are here to maybe able to give you some feedback and some reassurance about how we're creating this 6-foot distance that we've talked about that you brought up. So I'm hoping that people can stand around so you can hear from the experts in the field.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And also, were we going to do a video or at the very,
We can
do it
say
at the very end?
Yes.
Okay, board, a motion is in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
I'll second it.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion? Seeing as none, Mr. Seymour, will you call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously, so we will move on to the treasurer's report. 7.01, which is the financial statements for August 2020. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, Board, for the month of August 2020, ended with year-to-date revenues within the general fund of $14.2 million and month-to-date revenues of $6.1 million, which was real estate settlement taxes and also the monthly state foundation report. For the year-to-date expenditures so far this year, we've spent $7.9 million, and we're currently running around 2.6% under budget. Our year-end financial activity month-end for all funds for August, we had roughly $58 million, $23 million in the general fund, $3.9 million in our building fund, and $22.5 million in classroom facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, are there any questions? With no objections being heard, let the financial statement for the month of August 2020 be submitted for audit. We'll move right on to item number 801, which is the Treasurer's Investments Report. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, for the month of August, we had $58.1 million invested. For the month of August, we earned approximately $130,000. $38,000 of that in the general fund and $91,000 in the building fund.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the investment report as presented.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you call the vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 8.02, the resolution for appropriations for the fiscal year 2020. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor again.
Yes, your next two items are the appropriations for the coming school year, the current school year, and also followed by a resolution for the 5-year forecast. And then also we're going to once again ask the Board of Education to readopt their 5-year financial plan. So with that, I'm going to take just a few minutes to go over the next 3 items before you vote, if you would give me a few minutes. And you might notice that this year I have a little color in my slides, thanks to Mrs. Karina Denny. She helped me polish them up. So now she's taught me new technology on changing, so. Okay, I have it on. Is it not going to work from here? What did I do?
When you get too high-tech, Mr. Seymour, this is what happens.
Well, you learn something new every year. As you know, the total appropriations are for all funds, and we mostly talk about the general fund because the general fund is where the board has the most discretion. Almost all of your other funds are specific purpose and have guidelines and restrictions attached to them. But for the purposes of the appropriations that you're going to adopt, the board's going to be asked to adopt total appropriations of $73.8 million this evening. Of that, the general fund is $56.5 million. Enterprise funds, which are mostly made up of our lunchroom fund, are $2.9 million. Capital outlay funds of $5 million. Debt service of $3 million, and then specific special revenue funds of $6.5 million. But as you can see from the chart, a majority of our funding still comes from taxpayer dollars and state foundation for general operating fund, which has the discretion of the board. Among most of our special revenue funds, which are really specific in purpose, we have our athletic, band and music at $280,000. Auxiliary services is our non-public schools in the district. All the funds that they receive from the state go through Winton Woods Board of Education, and we monitor and spend those funds for their behalf. New last year and also continuing this year is the Student Success and Wellness Fund. This is a new fund put in by the governor to help support students outside of the classroom through health, wellness, and we also use part of that for truancy and to help support the children outside the classroom and our counselors. New this year was the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Act for COVID-19. And out of this fund is where we contracted LDB, is that correct? Our environmental health services federal funds are paying for their services. We also have a new fund called COVID Relief, which was just released by the governor. And out of that fund, we are funding a lot of our Chromebooks for our tech department. We have also IDEA Title I, which is a major fund of $1.5 million. We still continue to get Striving Readers grant through our curriculum department, and then Title IIA, which is called Teacher Quality. All these funds have specific guidelines, and the curriculum department has strict budgetary guidelines from ODE that they must follow when spending these funds. But they do support our educational program. Other major funds is permanent improvement at $700,000. Our building funds currently only have an unencumbered balance of $4.2 million. Even though it was over $110 million to build the buildings, we only have uncommitted, unencumbered funds currently of $4.2 million. And then, of course, food service is approaching a $3 million operation in Winton Woods. But most of our focus is on the general fund, which is where the board has the most discretion. That is where we fund most of our employment contracts and our instructional program. As you know, the appropriations is the budgetary, but I think we need to just take a look at where those funds come from to support the general operations. And as you can see, local taxes still comprise over 50% of our income. Our state foundation is at 40%, and then of course we have some investments, some other local income, and some other state income. Fortunately for the district, as you recall, back in the recession, our total taxable valuation went clear down to $442 billion, and then it started climbing and stabilizing. All words are from the Hamilton County Auditor and also from the state of Ohio that the pandemic has not hurt the housing market at all. So currently the housing market and evaluations of our district have continued to stay stable. We've received no word that our total valuations could go down due to the pandemic. Real estate tax collections could be a different story. We haven't heard how those are going to run yet, but as far as the value of the home, the pandemic has not hurt the sale of homes in the housing market. So basically, the district for real estate taxes, we have a $465 million tax base. Currently, the voted millage for Winton Woods is 94.11 mils, and the effective millage is 59.59. As you know, effective millage is after there is a reappraisal, the voted millage is reduced so that you cannot collect more than you collected before the reappraisal and the was increased. So the only way you really can get additional dollars through real estate taxes is unfortunately asking your voters to pass an additional levy. So currently the general fund is at 51.21 mils, permanent improvement is 1.78, and our bond retirement is at 6.6. I might mention that when we first sold our bonds, our bond retirement was 6.95. Also, when you first passed permanent improvement, approximately 11 years ago, it was 2 mils. So you can see the growth, some of the growth on the tax base of the Winton Woods District has helped reduce that effective millage, which is why you have voted millage of 94, and yet the effective millage comes clear down to 51.21. Our real estate taxes for the district is going to continue to generate approximately $25 million, of which $2.8 million of that is homestead and rollback, paid for by the state of Ohio, which reduces the homeowner's taxes by 12.5%. State funding for this year, the state funding formula, we don't really have a funding formula right now. We got the same as we got 2 years ago, minus $551,000. We're currently operating without a funding formula in the state of Ohio. We basically have been told to date that we're going to get the same as we got last year. The only thing that we could get additional dollars for is if when we supply our enrollment for the year, if our enrollment fluctuates by more than 2%, we could get an enrollment adjustment. But we'll continue to get transportation for special ed, and also we will get partial funding for preschool. Other local receipts include revenue in lieu of taxes. Those are where we work out TIF agreements with our local municipalities, and in those, if we do a TIF agreement, meaning tax incremental financing, the municipality will hold the district harmless and only collect those taxes collected by other entities. We also have an open enrollment projection of 1.3 million, tuition from other districts of 900,000, rental facilities around 100, and other local revenues of 2.77. Other state receipts basically include our Medicare reimbursement. Our district employees do a lot of work, as Tanya Bray and Special Services can attest. We do a lot of work to get those Medicaid reimbursement dollars through the Medicaid system and documenting everything we do for any child that receives Medicaid. We also get what's called catastrophic aid for children who are highly expensive to educate. This year, the threshold was $42,000. Any child that cost over $42,000 due to an IEP will get partial reimbursement through what's called catastrophic aid. We also get some E-rate through our computer technology department, and then casino proceeds are cut in half. We have no idea what we're going to get from casino proceeds this year, and we were told to estimate roughly 50%. How do we spend these dollars? Currently, the district is spending the dollars mostly on our instructional program. And as you can see, extracurricular is only costing roughly 1.7%. Instruction is at 75%. Instruction is in the classroom, anything that's in the classroom or anything that directly supports the child. The operations of the district are basically maintenance, transportation, and administration and anything that's not directly in the classroom. So our total appropriations for the coming year, we've estimated salaries at roughly 30 million, benefits at 11 million, purchase services, which are all of the district contracts, at 12 million, supplies and materials at 1.5 million, equipment, Mr. Smith slashed. We're under constraints right now. We have an estimated $80,000 for anything that might break down. And then, of course, other expenditures. A majority of the other expenditures are real estate tax collection fees and liability insurance. Our total expenditures, a little graph there to show how our total expenditures have grown over the past 10 years. And as you can see, personnel costs have been stable. The thing that's harder to control is the cost of health care. So for benefits and salaries for the coming appropriations, I would like to share that all the negotiated salary adjustments have been included. All the staffing reallocations are included. Health care is projected at 7%, and dental care is at 5%. And as I will probably iterate in the 5-year forecast or on the next page here, I wanted to share that all administrators and support staff froze their salaries for the year due to the pandemic. We were very pleased to finally come to terms with WWTA, and they froze their salary. And they basically took a 2% reduction in pay for the current year because they had already negotiated in good faith with the administration to get a 2% raise this year. They withdrew the 2% and kept their current salary as a freeze. OPSI also did the same thing. OPSI was to receive, had already negotiated a 2.75% increase and agreed to forego that and froze their salaries for the current year. The only non-personnel expenditures that we have that continues to escalate and that we really cannot control is our tuition. And it's our tuition, a lot of it is through our IEP children or children that come new to the district, and we cannot always control that. So it's estimated that tuition for special programming will roughly be a $900,000 increase. And also, Mr. Smith implemented $500,000 in budget reductions beyond personnel and benefits for the year. So in summary, our general fund will start out with $17 million, estimated receipts of $49 million, estimated or budgeted expenditures of $56 for an ending cash balance of $10,000. Now we'll change gears just a little and take a look at the 5-year forecast. What's included in the forecast? All the revenues in the forecast are held constant except for the following exceptions. State Foundation. As you know, last year we received a $551,000 cut. We have been told to expect that $551,000 cut for this year. The district lost potential funding before the new biennium began of $2.6 million. As you know, we were under a prior funding formula where we were capped to get a 3.5% increase until we saw a growth of $3.5 million. The funding formula changed and we never really realized that. Winton Woods never received that full funding due to the 3% cap growth. We've been in many state programs and classes with ODE. By all indications, the Cup-Patterson Fair Share funding plan is still in process. The state currently has no funding formula. As you know, Mr. Cup was appointed Speaker of the House. He is also a pro-advocate of education, and So they're hopeful that the Patterson funding formula will begin to kick off and start working. The state of Ohio economy is recovering faster than they thought they would. We were in a meeting last week with Aaron Rouse from the state of Ohio, and the economy is recovering faster than they thought it would. Their income tax is coming in. They discovered that a majority of the high wage earners continued to work, that a lot of the people on unemployment were the lower wage earners, and they did not realize as much of a loss in income tax as they thought. They were nervous because, as you know, the income tax filing was delayed for several months, so they were unsure what was going to happen with income tax, but income tax was not impacted as hard as they thought it would. And also, it's anticipated there will be no additional recommendations from the governor to increase any additional reductions for K through 12 education. So with that in mind, I projected this year at 19.8 with the $551,000 reduction. For next year and the years through that, I increased and brought back the reduction back to funding level before we had any reduction. What happens beyond that, I have no idea. But by all indications, the state of Ohio has to have a funding formula for the next funding biennium. They're currently operating with no funding formula for K through 12. So our projected revenue in the forecast still includes the 6.95 mil levy beginning January 1st of 2021, and as you know, we are on the November ballot. Some of the expenditure assumptions I have included all negotiated agreements. No salary increases have been included. However, steps for all years, step increases for all negotiated salary schedules have been included. Healthcare at 7% and dental at 5%. So in the 5-year forecast, what the ODE looks at is your operating cash balance. And as you can see, our operating cash balance continues to increase until we will run out of cash balance or reserve funds to fund the current year operations. For the for fiscal year 19, it was roughly $1 million. Last year it went down, and then this coming budget, the operating deficit goes back up. This is just a chart to simply show where we're at with our 5-year forecast in millions, which no one can read, so we'll just go on. But this chart right here shows with the 5-year forecast, your expenditures, if you can see it, hopefully it's blue. Mine's black and white up here. Hopefully it's blue. And you can see the red line is the receipts. We have to pass the levy for the green line. We have to keep that distance. We have to keep a gap between blue and green. We have to operate with a cash balance. So even with the with the help of all of our employees this year, by giving back raises that they were entitled to and they negotiated them back to us, $500,000 in cuts, and then of course we lost $500,000 in state funding. We're just hopeful that we can get on track and that the 6.95 mil levy will be sufficient with all of the unknowns that we currently have. As you can tell by looking at me, I've been doing this for a few years. This last 2 years have been very unique in budgeting. So this is called Randy's best guess. And then if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them, and then we're going to vote on the appropriations, the forecast, and ask the board to once again approve our five-year financial plan. As you know, we got a letter from ODE where we have to reply to how we're going to handle our forecast. And in your resolution, at the end of your resolution, it addresses our plan for addressing our deficits.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order. Actually, Mr. Seymour, are we doing both 8.03 and 8.04? I noticed you had had information for both in your.
I was just going to ask that we do them both separately now.
Okay.
Yes,
all
thank
right.
you.
Board, a motion is in order to approve the five-year financial plan.
The permanent appropriations, sorry.
Did I miss that one?
8.02.
Oh. Yes, to approve 8.02.
I'll make a motion to approve the permanent appropriations for fiscal year 2021 as presented.
I second it.
Board has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cavalletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Douglas?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is item 8.03, resolution for a five-year plan. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Did you want me to read it for you? I don't mind.
It's totally up to you.
Whereas on the 28th day of September 2020, the Winton Woods Board of Education approved and adopted a five-year forecast for the general operating budget of the district, targeting limits on expenditures and growth. Whereas the Winton Woods Board of Education will monitor the use of parameters on expenditures as set aside in this resolution and continue utilization of these parameters through fiscal years 25. And whereas the Winton Woods Board of Education has not requested an additional tax levy for operations since 2009, which is currently a 10-year span since a request for additional taxes have been requested for day-to-day operations on our school. Whereas the Winton Woods Board of Education did pass a $4.2 million substitute levy on November 6, 2018, which did not increase the taxes generated to the district, and has committed that the current funding will last 2 years. Whereas the Winton Woods Board of Education will be proposing a new levy for collection in fiscal year 21, currently estimated at 6.95 mils, for approximately a $3.2 million increase in requested taxes, which will have increase in taxes, which will equal a 12-year span since the last increase. Whereas the Winton Woods resources will be aligned to meet district goals and objectives, and all financial decisions will consider the impact on student achievement. The Board of Education resolves to utilize financial parameters, continue its commitment to academic excellence, evaluate the condition of its facilities to maintain the community's investment in them, the need for technology, infrastructure, and equipment to provide tools to teach the adopted curriculum aligned to project-based learning for the Winton Woods students. And further, the Winton Woods Board of Education resolves to commit to new financial parameters as follows. The Winton Woods General Operating Fund budget targets will be no more than an average of 2% growth of the budget fiscal year 21 through fiscal year 25. The growth measure will be all expenditures. Deviations from these parameters must be board approved.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for the five-year financial plan as presented.
Second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? I'd like to say, I was brand new to the district when we did when we passed the last levy, and I think my daughter started in 2008. So this is the first time going back for an operational levy. So kudos to the staff and the administration, Mr. Seymour, your department, and Mr. Smith for finding some operational efficiencies in this very challenging time, as well as both organizations, the teachers organization and OPSI, in being very flexible in these uncertain financial times. So that's unheard of, to go from 2009, as long as that we have not gone back to the community for a levy. And it's critical, especially in these times. So that's all I had to say. So Mr. Seymour, would you call the vote, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The the vote passes unanimously. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 8.04, 5-year financial fiscal years 2021 through 25. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
I would just like to request that you approve the 5-year forecast as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order.
I make a motion to approve the 5-year forecast for fiscal years 2021 through 2025 as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is 9.01 through 9.04, the reports of the superintendent, and no action will be needed to be taken by vote, but board members will be given an opportunity to ask questions of the superintendent. With that said, 9.01, school reports. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Madam Vice President, since we have not had school in session in person, there are no school reports, but I'm going to transition to 9.02. I'm sure everyone in the room heard the report from Mr. Seymour, the treasurer, where we were able to slash $580,000 from the budget because of the state's increase or takeover of $551,000. I just want people to understand we will not be able to keep doing that. That was a very, very interesting find. We were very successful, but as the Vice President mentioned, as well as the Board Treasurer, the 6.95 mills, which will generate $3.25 million levy, is absolutely essential. Otherwise, Mr. Seymour's forecast is dead on. It's very accurate. There will be issues in the year 2025. So to go on with the report, the transitions, there will be our most vulnerable students will transition starting tomorrow. These are students that are preschoolers, kindergarten students, our ESL, and also our students with disabilities. The next transition will occur the week of the October 5th. Students will not all come back in one session because we believe that that would oversaturate the system. So they will attend on a blue day, which is the 5th and 6th. There will be a virtual day. Please understand that when we said there will be a virtual day, Mr. Denny wanted me to make sure that people understood his department, that that does not mean that that is the only deep cleaning day. There will be deep cleaning in the building every single night. This is just another way to give us another way where there are no children in the building so we can do it in a very, very thorough fashion. The 8th and 9th will be green days. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to put family groups together regardless of what grade the student was in, unless the parents are requesting something different. We do have students on the books waiting to be enrolled in the district, transferring from other districts and other communities. We're holding them back at this point. We're putting them in a virtual opportunity until we can figure out exactly what grades they should be in, and do we have all the necessary documentation and paperwork from testing to determine where they are. So the next transition, we will stay blue and green for the entire month of October, and we will keep that same transition until we transition to Thanksgiving break. On November 30th, which is the final day of November, we will actually attempt to transition to a full operational system where all students that are coming back. But I want people to just understand that parents are still going to choose a virtual opportunity. The virtual opportunity cannot be taken away from families. So even if the district is saying that we will transition back full speed with all students, I wanted the public to understand that the parents are still making a decision about virtual. The final piece is Mrs. Denny and I have been working on this report just to make sure that it was comprehensive enough. There are 32 districts in our community, in our surrounding area. And out of 32 districts, only 3 are virtual at this point. The other 3, including us, we're transitioning to become a blended operation very, very soon, as you heard from my scheduled timeline. So that's the quick overview.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. You can move right on into, well, first of all, are there any questions from the board? Seeing as none, Mr. Smith, you can move right on into 9.03.
Yeah, the 9.03, I know some of you had the opportunity to come to the roundtable conversation, as well as overviews that we've sent out in communications about our company LJB. I would have to say Mr. Seymour was very, very supportive in locating this company from a neighboring district. Mr. Denny and I read all the specs, all the documentation. We had the meetings privately and in virtual, in person, and we were very, very satisfied with how this particular company could help us move into a transition program that was going to be very, very successful and also safe for not just the teachers, but the children and the regular staff too. The other thing that people needed to understand was most of the districts that we're talking about, the 32, many of them have had some level of an outbreak. They've had some small numbers. Some of those numbers are a little bit larger. But LJB is working with us to make sure that if there is an outbreak, it is an opportunity by listening and following their guidelines where it would not be a total shutdown of our system. That would actually overwhelm us. So, Mr. Denny, if you're ready.
Good evening, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening, board. Appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to see so many friendly faces, familiar faces this evening. Back when the COVID-19 pandemic gripped our nation in March, we began studying and trying to learn how to deal with it, how to tackle this one. It's a monster. And what we realized quickly, even though our executive team and many of us applied ourselves diligently, we began to realize very quickly that we're educators by trade. We don't do pandemic for a living. We don't do epidemiology. We are educators, and we're good ones. The people in this room have literally hundreds of years of experience in education if you combine us. But we have probably less than 5 years in dealing with something like this, if not less than 1 perhaps, combined experience. So we turned to a company, and they've been delightful to work with, an engineering firm called LJB, as Mr. Smith had mentioned. And we're very excited. They've been incredible to work with. I personally and our team, I know we've learned a lot. I know some of you in this room perhaps had an opportunity to interact with them as well. And I'm sure you found them very educational. So they actually do this for a living. This is what these hygienists and engineers do. So they've come side by side with us since mid-August and have really helped us develop some guidelines that if we follow them, because it's always about fidelity to the model, right? But if we follow them, they can really help keep our children and our community safe, our staff safe. So without too much further ado, we're excited to have Mr. Kevin Wilcox with us here this evening, and also Don Colombian. He'll introduce Don and the firm, and I'll turn it over to Kevin at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. That's a nice introduction. Thank you, Mr. Smith, also. So it's my pleasure to be here tonight to just give a very broad overview. What I'll be doing is a very broad overview of LJB. I think that'll be important to understand sort of the broader picture. Then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Don, who's joining us from Greensboro, North Carolina. She's doing a safety training class down there. So Don, if you just a couple charts we have, but Don, go ahead and flip the slide, if you will. So just a very broad overview of LJB. We are a consulting engineering company, right? And we work all over the country, work all over the world, really, but happen to have our corporate office here in Dayton, Ohio. Got offices in Carolinas, Houston, Washington, D.C., several locations. A couple hundred people, round numbers, right? We keep growing, and so the number changes daily. But that's the gist of it, right? We're not some mega firm, but we're also not just a little mom and pop company. But foundationally, an engineering company. And so, as you might see on the charts, there's 4 key areas that we serve. One is structural engineering. So a typical project might be the buildings that you guys are about to move into. We weren't unfortunately involved in those, but that would be a typical project for our structural engineering folks. The second practice is our HS&E, the health, safety, and environmental practice. We're going to talk more about that, so I'll skip over that for the time being. The third area is our geospatial and site design service, and that is really more civil and site engineering for commercial development, say, for example. Some specialty services like photogrammetry, where you fly drones over to get aerial imagery and do some fancy things with that. But that's still the GSD practice. And then the fourth one is transportation, so much more traditional engineering, roads and bridges and that sort of thing. Right, so again, engineering. And how does that fit into the HS&E, right? We talk about industrial hygienists, we talk about health and safety, and how does that fit? Well, it fits because fundamentally engineering is taking applied science, or taking known science and known knowledge and applying that to solve problems. And that's exactly how we approach this thing, the pandemic response, right? It's an infectious disease, a science, and you apply that to solve the specific problems of how do you keep a business or an organization running in the midst of it all, right? And so that's really what our health, safety, and environmental practice does. It's not just the industrial hygiene and things like that. It's also safety at height. So while people are working on top of a building or on a machine in a Ford plant, right, we're out taking known science and applying that to solve problems. So Don, if you flip to the next slide, we wouldn't be here today talking to you about this if it weren't for these 2 folks that you can see listed there. Colonel Kirk Phillips, he heads our HS&E practice, and then Don Colombi, who should be speaking here as soon as I get done. But those 2 individuals, they're industrial hygienists by sort of background. But if you stop and think about when was the last time we had a global pandemic? It was about 100 years ago. So all the industrial hygienists that are out there practicing and doing the best they can and trying to help other companies and organizations get through this, they really don't have any firsthand experience solving these problems, right? It's all kind of theory, and they're learning on the job. Well, it just so happens that Colonel Phillips led the EHS practice for the United States Air Force. He spent 28 years in the Air Force. And while he was in that role, he developed these pandemic responses for what essentially turned into the DoD program. Because you stop and think about it, our national defense depends on the ability of those troops to keep doing what they do. Doesn't matter what you throw at them, right? It could be a global pandemic. We still have to defend the country. And so that experience proved to be vital. We didn't know it, right? When he joined LJB 2 or 3 years ago, we had no idea this was coming. Who did? But that experience and that expertise that he brought with him has enabled us to do the kind of work that we've done with Winton Woods. Dawn's experience is not much different from that. She also learned in the government, because that's where this stuff really gets applied, right? And so Dawn spent a lot of time with the Air National Guard and the Department of Labor, building on the background that she had, but applying it to solving real problems. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Dawn, and she'll walk you through kind of the process that we went through with Winton Woods And just as Mr. Denny said, it was very collaborative. Everything we do is meant to be working with our customers, not for them or to them, right? And so, Don, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Kevin. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you give me a quick check that it's okay? Verbally, please?
Yeah, that's
Thank
good,
you.
Don.
Okay, great. So the way that we approached this situation was we reviewed all your established goals and documents initially before we even came on site. We spoke with the leadership and identified what their non-negotiables were basically, and where we weren't going to budge, and otherwise they pretty much let us go free range with everything. We walked through the facilities after that initial meeting, each of the facilities, and the first thing that we did when we got there was meet with the principals. We spent about an hour with the principals. They explained to us their vision for the program and how they were going to execute the plan. And we did want to start out at full capacity, full time. That was the goal all along. We found out very quickly at the first school that we went to that we would not be able to accommodate a 6-foot distancing, which is Hamilton County's requirement for contact tracing, without reducing the class size. We approach these things in layers, and we like to think of it as Swiss cheese. And each of those layers is a means of control. So the more layers you have, the more controls and the less risk you have. A lot of this is not, it's definitely a science, but it's also a degree of accepted risk. So understanding what your risk factors are and how they play into the whole is a huge part of developing these programs. And we spent a lot of time, like I said, with the principals and with leadership to develop that. So walking through the facilities, we looked at classrooms, we looked at all specials classes, we looked at lunch and recess and every activity that goes on. And we not only looked at it individually, but we looked at it as a whole. We collaborated with the staff and educators after we had our final recommendations, and we fine-tuned those and we adjusted them and made some adjustments to the original plan with that acceptable risk. And that's how we developed the plans and the protocols and controls that are in place for you guys now. We did one large report with breakdowns of each facility, because each facility is unique and has different focus areas that we actually paid attention to, more so than others. For example, your chorus and band and orchestra at the middle school and above levels is much different and needs to be looked at differently than the music program in the elementary schools. So we made sure that we were very specific in each of the schools for all of those programs. We also looked over at the alternative education facility at Green Hills Community Center and the transportation office, and also the central office too, with recommendations there.
Yeah, so, sorry to interrupt you, Don. The idea here for us is we present this overview, but really if you have any questions or comments that you wanted to ask us, we'll be happy to do our best to respond to those on the spot if you'd like.
Well, I had gotten some information earlier about what you do and how the district was working with you, and I think it's a great addition to have you all on board. As Mr. Denny stated, none of us do pandemic work as a profession, so it's good to have some professionals on board. So I guess you gave a pretty good plan about how you've worked with the district. do you work with every step, like with the transition plan that we're talking about? Do you have a role in giving some recommendations with that?
So yes, the idea is we're going to support, and I'll ask Mr. Denny to sort of speak to this too, but we're certainly here to support as you make these transitions. One of the things we've done for other districts is actually go, as they transition in, let a day or two go by and sort of get their feet under them, but then walk in and observe where the protocol's being well run and where's it maybe got room for some tweaks. So I'll give you one simple example. There's one of the protocols was in an elementary school, the students were to, as they were to leave to go to the restroom, they were to sign out, right, and write their name so in everybody's single file. Well, they were sharing a pen. Right, so it's little things like that, but we observed that and we made a recommendation to just, they've got a backpack full of pens, right, so they reach in and use their own pen. So that sort of little thing is really what we're trying to do to help support you in that manner.
Thank you.
And I just might add to that, Ms. Ruglis, that the district developed 3 plans that this board approved, and our goal was to remain true to those while enhancing it with the expertise that LJB could provide on how do you build quality controls. And there's really 5 strategies, and they're your basic CDC framework, but social distancing is critical. And so they've really helped us a lot with that. When is a barrier helpful? When is it not needed? Masking, help with lunch, and a lot of the different finer points have really been helpful. So the goal was always to take the plans that we had and really breathe into them and give them life and give them more effectiveness, if you will.
And I think that's helpful because I think you answered the question. So because this is, what works today, something else happens, and then you have to make another plan. I just want to know, are you on board? So when something happens and we say, okay, now we have to shift and pivot to something, it's good to know that your company is there to help us with that, whatever that transition is.
Absolutely.
Ms. Ruglis, one of the reasons we are using a virtual opportunity for Wednesdays, every Wednesdays, is not just about the cleaning, but it's so that we can stay consistent with the virtual opportunities in the event that we have to transition back. Students have not forgotten the virtual experiences that they had before. And it's really to let parents know that we expect students to have their laptops at home and their Chromebooks, and we have to figure out the little ones, how they transport it back and forth, because at the end of the day, we didn't know March 15th was coming. And so we have to be ready for it the best way that we can. So keeping a virtual day in the middle actually gives us some time to transition back if we need to, because it may be a moment's notice that say we have to transition again.
Dr. Cupoletti?
I hope this isn't too simple a question. You mentioned masks and you mentioned social distancing, and I can understand that. I'm curious about hand washing. If we have, I don't know, 60 children, how often will they wash their hands? Where will they wash their hands? How long will it take them to do this? Do we need some portable hand washing stations, for example?
Great question.
I appreciate the question, Dr. Cupoletti. As you exit, if you just look out here, we actually have gone ahead and done that. There are 40 wash stations positioned around the district right now, in addition to the restrooms and, of course, group restrooms and individual restrooms we have. We feel that it was appropriate to add some capacity in that regard, especially when LJB has kind of assisted us with what they suggest are maximum occupancies for restrooming. So you don't want to overload the restrooms, you don't want to overcrowd. So you're generally looking at about 5 at a time, depending on the size of the restroom, in order to try to get kids back into the learning process as quickly as possible. We put in some extra stations for students to wash. Hand washing is always more effective than sanitizing, and I might kick it to Dawn here in a moment, but there's also a lot of hand sanitizer. There's wall-mounted dispensers in every classroom. There's additional supplies on the desk for teachers. So we've really tried to inundate the environment with a multitude of ways to have clean hands, because that's important. So Dawn, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that and some of the
Mr.
recommendations?
Denny?
Or, sorry, Dawn, Mr. Smith?
Before Don gives her overview, can you just, because I think people are very, very concerned about numbers and about the essential equipment, can you give a little more information about how many masks we have on hand for staff as well as students?
Wow. Well, we have an inventory tracking sheet where we try to keep up with this on a weekly basis. When we get to, a supply level gets to 25% of the original ordered, we try to order more, just because we're a little concerned about supply chain and making sure we stay out in front of it to get new supplies in. We ordered, I'd say we probably had somewhere in the vicinity of 20,000 washable masks to begin the school year. We've distributed around almost 10,000 of those to staff and classrooms for students to be able to give each student 2 washable face masks. We started off with a supply of 16,000 disposable masks, basically to make sure that if a student forgot their mask, a visitor walked in without one, a student's mask broke, it became soiled or something to that effect, we would be able to supply students with a replacement mask easily until they could get their own washable back in action. The list just goes on and on and on. I mean, literally thousands and thousands of supplies.
Yeah, and the reason I mention that, I know that having the conversation with parents and also a few elementary teachers, parents are concerned about the mask that they sent with their child not being the mask that the kid brought home, because young people are trading masks back and forth because they like the fire truck as opposed to the basketball. So one of the things that we'd like for the teachers to attempt to do and staff is when the kid brings a special mask, we're asking that you ask him to kind of put it away and then issue a district mask, which means that they don't have the luxury of trading something that looks more favorable or more flowery. The other part is, Mr. Denny, before we get the next piece, can you mention a little bit about the transparent mask and what that was for and how we were able to secure these?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So it came to our attention rather quickly when we're talking about masking that some students, especially at the younger ages, although not exclusively, benefit a great deal from being able to see their instructor's mouth and vice versa, that the instructor, if they can see the mouth, forming blends, pronouncing certain words, whether that's someone who's a native English speaker or an English language learner, they benefit a great deal from being able to see that. So we're able to find this mask that's a washable mask, and our goal was to distribute those to all students with disabilities who are engaged in speech and language as a related service, and also distribute those to teachers and students of ESL children. So wanted to make sure that that resource was in place, and I believe those just got distributed last week, so they should be ready to go.
And then there's one last question. I know that the teacher was concerned about, I have a room of 14 students. Based on the square feet of my room, I cannot create this 6-foot distancing that the district is actually expecting us to do. Based on the work that you guys have done across the country, LJB, in conjunction with the Center for Disease Control, is there a number that challenges the 6 feet, something that's not as definitive, or is 6 feet it?
All right, I think what I heard you ask is whether or not we're digging our feet in so at that 6-foot distance with masking, or whether there's flexibility. Is that correct?
That is accurate.
Okay. Currently, Hamilton County has a requirement for close contact tracing at 6-foot distancing. That's why we have the 6-foot distance. In addition to scientific evidence that shows that that's the distance that airborne virus can travel more easily. And inside of that 6-foot distance is a higher risk. And the more you go inside, the more risk that's created. So what we tried to do with the 6-foot distancing and the masking is meet Hamilton County's direction and definition of contact tracing. Because once you start clustering, for example, if somebody comes with a positive, if you're inside of a 6-foot radius for greater than 15 minutes, to that person, you will be identified as a contact, which means you will quarantine. So rather than look at, there is flexibility, but it's a risk in the contact tracing department and how many people you would have to send home for virtual learning, to include staff potentially, and quarantine. So that's where the 6-foot give and take comes in. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
And the reason I asked the question, I know that there are districts all over the state of Ohio that's trying to get the governor and the Department of, Safety to change those numbers. And it's
Yep.
one district in particular, which is a private school in the northern part of Ohio, and they want the order to change just for them. And I can tell you the governor will not change the order for one district. It will be for all districts or not at all. So we have to wait patiently to see. I'm actually on the phone with the commissioner every Friday, and also the Dr. Fagans and the Center for Disease Control, and they're giving us numbers to let us know that, and I wanted the board as well as the community to know that for the students in the area that we serve ages 3 to 18, there have not been any increases at this point. Things have remained constant, and that's why we're actually ready for the next transition. We wanted to wait until after Labor Day. You know what the other holidays did, but this one was different for that age group. So we're confident that we're transitioning at the right moment.
And keep in mind that the board approved 3 plans with the mindset of let's start virtually and let's look at the data and check the data and track the data up to 5 weeks, and then make a decision based on if we see that the numbers have gone up, we would, remain virtually, or if they remain constant, and even waiting after Labor Day to see if there was a spike. So, having those 3 plans of virtual, then blended or in person was very intentional, in that we check the numbers every 5 weeks to understand if an adjustment would need to be made, as well as having LJB on board to help us with that.
One correction, Ms. Ruggles, we check the numbers every day.
Every day.
We check the numbers every day.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question. I guess if a teacher has an issue that was brought up this evening where there's too many children to get the 6 foot of distance, what are we telling them to do, or who is their resource to get that resolved?
Okay, we're also working on 2 plans. Number one, to minimize some of those classrooms, but we're also working on protective barriers. Mr. Denny, you want to mention something about it?
Absolutely, thanks, Mr. Smith. So the district has invested in, and it's using our pandemic response dollars, the federal assistance dollars. We've invested in a supply of barriers. And again, the key principle in this is when the 6 foot distancing can be maintained, the barrier is not necessary. However, if you go inside the distance, it may be advantageous to install a barrier. And what that does is it basically puts another layer of protection between you and other individuals and you in order to mitigate risk. Nothing you do completely eliminates risk, but you can mitigate it to a great deal. And masking and the strategies we use, barriers, all of these things that you see are designed to minimize the risk to a much more acceptable level. So we have invested in barriers. We're basically looking at where can't you socially distance 6 feet? And if that can't occur, then on a case-by-case basis, we'll come in and utilize those resources and deploy those. One example is right here in the high school cafeteria. In order to maximize the amount of students we can feed and serve and not cause them to lose massive amounts of learning time, we can deploy barriers in here to allow more than one child to sit at a table. So that's something that we're looking at right now as well. Just an example, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, we're asking, all staff members to remember these are orders that come from the governor, and we'd like for people to really follow them to the letter about wearing the mask. And I know that you guys have been in your rooms alone for many, many weeks without having children. And when you're alone in your room, you've made the choice of not wearing the mask, and we have not had an issue with it, nor does the CDC. However, the other part that's a little bit rough for us is the students that you've been working with at home virtually have not been wearing masks either. And so there's going to have to be some kind of educational opportunity. And I can assure you that the administrators are going to have these small mini assemblies with every child, letting them know what the expectations are. But you guys have modeled the behavior in such an incredible way that we've not had an outbreak, and we applaud you for it, and we're hoping that we can keep the same opportunity available for students as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Final, Mr. McGowan mentioned at one of our first meetings, he would be comfortable, and he and I talked about and shared the numbers. He would be comfortable if the system, and I don't know if people understand the 4 colors that are defined by, the pandemic. It's purple, that means no one is going or moving anywhere. It's red, of course, which is where we were in Hamilton County for a while. We've transitioned to orange, but someone mentioned that we hope that we get back to yellow. Folks, since they started the number codes, we've never been in yellow. No system has been in yellow in the state of Ohio. So we wanted to let you know that yellow is our goal. We have never been there. But again, as we begin to do the research about the 32 districts that surround us, every one of those districts is in session, and some of those districts took it upon themselves to do it. And I'm not criticizing any superintendent's plan because we all have our own unique circumstance. We do know that there are some districts that have transitioned back to red. We are not one of those. We are not one of those communities, and we're safe to say that we're not. But the one thing that we wanted you to know is that we're keeping every available conversation that we need to have. We're making sure that we have it in place, and we're doing it with a level of fidelity so people understand that your safety is very important to us every single day. And we wanted you to know it, and that's why we have experts here to help leverage some of our conversations. So it's not just, as Mr. Denny mentioned in the beginning, we are educators by trade. We are not very familiar with the pandemic or viruses. However, we brought experts in that could help assist us along the way. So when your friends and family ask you, how is the transition in your district, we would say that we took an extra step to make sure that you were safe and things were reliable. But I'd like to do something quickly. How many of you have children in other districts? And how many of your children in other districts go to school every day? Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I say one more thing? Just in the interest of keeping everybody safe and healthy. If you think back to March and April and May, right, when the pandemic was spiking, our healthcare providers, as great as they are, we're learning on the job of how to treat this. Come this fall, they're going to be learning on the job how to treat coronavirus plus the flu.
Yes.
At the same time. So get a flu shot. If there's one thing you can do to help keep things under control is get a flu shot. I'm not one who, frankly, usually gets a flu shot. I have this year, and everybody that I know and love, I'm really encouraging them to do that. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that. I think Mr. Denny has a couple more comments as well.
Just briefly, I wanted to just take a moment to thank Dawn and Kevin and LJB for their expertise. They've been great to work with, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Denny, one of the things that came up with the teachers' conversation with the union, it was the idea about disinfecting, and they wanted to know if there's some expectation to disinfect rooms or anything like that, would they have the proper equipment of safety gloves? And I think you've already addressed it, that they would have all the equipment that they need.
Yeah, that can definitely be arranged, Mr. Smith.
Okay.
Should be requestable from the main offices, and if not, just a quick call to the business office. We can make sure we get supplies. We have them in stock.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Smith, do you want to move on to 9.04?
9.04, Madam Vice President, is the
Facilities update.
Facilities update. You're back. Thank you again, Mr. Smith, and thank you, Board. It's my privilege to be able to supply an update on the progress of the construction projects in the district. And I would invite Karina, if she would, to go ahead and put the typical website view up. We have a lot of guests with us this evening, so I'll take the opportunity to remind them or let them know, as well as anyone who might be tuning in now at home or later on Waycross, our community access partner, that this information that I'm about to share is in large part available on our website. And it's available as an update every week. If you just go on to www.wintonwoods.org and you scroll to the bottom, you'll see a tile that looks like a crane. Click that, and it will take you to the construction updates page. It's full of all kinds of information, but at the top, you'll always be able to find the weekly blitz that covers both projects. That's the new 712 campus as well as the new K6 campus. And it provides just some photos and a quick narrative of what's going on at those sites. So I invite you to feel free to check that out whenever you have an opportunity. We're starting to get some really exciting images. I had the opportunity to be on site last Thursday, and was very excited to see sound panels in the gyms, basketball goals installed, classroom cabinetry installed, carpet starting to go in, LVT or linear luxury vinyl tile going in at the K6 for the classrooms. It's pretty exciting. Lockers, learning stairs, the whole 9 yards. It's really starting to come together. We continue to run on schedule, which I'm very thankful for, given what we've faced since March, of course, what all of us have faced. But we've been able to stay on schedule. The budgets continue to hold in place. Contingency funds are still available for unforeseen costs or to purchase alternates or things that add value to the buildings. So we've been really fortunate, I think. We've been in good hands with SHP and Skanska-Megan, our partners, to design and build the buildings. But we're really starting to see some great things. The photo visible on the screen there at the bottom actually shows topsoil going back in, so we'll start to get grass. Sidewalks are being installed, roadways at the K6, and also I think this week and next week we'll start to see some roadways at the high school, the new 712 as well. Technology racks going in right now so that we can install the servers and everything, the brain that will power that building from a technology standpoint. So it's pretty exciting. I'm happy to entertain any questions that, Mr. Smith, please.
Yes, Mr. Denny, several of the members of OPSI wanted to know, the workers that are working inside the building, are they practicing social distancing as well?
With a vengeance. They're very good at it. They wear a lot of PPE. They have portable wash stations just like we do, yes.
Are there any questions for Mr. Denny from the board?
Everything's still on time
Yes, sir, Mr. Birdie. We're still on schedule.
and on budget.
Thank you.
No, under budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's still early.
Can't say that enough.
I know.
It's still early.
Okay. Mrs., let me see. Yep.
We're on to the recommendations afterwards. Are we good? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Denny.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda are items 10.01 through 10.05. These are the superintendent's recommendations and will be approved by vote. So a motion and a second will be needed to vote. That said, Mr. Superintendent, you have the floor.
Yes, the first recommendation is the Personnel 10.01, Schedule A, Resignations, Schedule B, Personnel Employment, Schedule C, Personnel Support Staff, Schedule D, Personnel Certificated as well as Uncertificated, Extra Duties, Schedule E, Leaves, and finally, Schedule M, Termination.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, a motion is in order to approve schedules A, B, C, D, E, and M.
I make a motion to approve the personnel schedules as presented.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Kubiletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is 10.02, the list of schools declared as impractical to provide transportation during the 2020-2021 school year. Mr. Smith, you have the floor again.
Mr. Denny, for the sake of time, can you blend 10.02 and 10.03 together since they have the same vein?
Absolutely, Mr. Smith, thank you. So, Board, you should have before you two items to review and approve. We are requesting your approval for school bus stops as well as schools declared impractical. No changes actually in the schools declared impractical this year. That remains the same as last year. Bus stops have been updated accordingly according to the Versatrans system we use for routing at transportation. I'm happy to entertain any questions that might come up at this time over either of those two items.
Yeah, Mr. Denny, give the board and the audience an idea of what the term impractical means as it relates to this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. It's a great question. It does not mean inconvenient. It has a very specific meaning. Impractical in the state of Ohio means that for reasons due to loading or other factors affecting busing, you cannot actually provide pupil transport to that site. And then a very hard and fast rule that they use as well is if it would take more than 30 minutes drive time under normal conditions, that school is also not going to be provided transportation as well. And I'll just throw an example out. There's a large school, non-public school on the west side of town, and we get requests to transport there every year. We drive it, and it's always right outside the 30-minute radius, so transportation is not provided to that school. We would be required to provide transportation to any non-public school in the state of Ohio that we would normally provide transportation to for our students. So it's just a brief overview, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Denny and Mr. Smith. Board, a motion is in order to approve items 10.02 and 10.03. Do we need to do them separately?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. The first one we'll do 10.02. Board, a motion is in order to approve item 10.02, the list of schools declared as impractical to provide transportation during 2020 and a 2021 school year.
I'll make a motion to approve the list of schools declared as impractical to provide transportation during the 2020-2021 school year as presented.
I'll second it.
Mr. Seymour, will you please, I'm sorry, are there any questions before we move on? Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. McGowan's?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. Board, a motion is in order to approve the bus stops for the 2020-2021 school year.
I'll make a motion to approve the bus stops for the 2020-2021 school year as presented.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Capoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan's?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is 10.04, the resolution to recognize October as 2020 as the National Principals Month. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
That resolution is read by your colleague.
Oh, I didn't know if you were going to give any background behind that first, but Mr. McGowan, will you please read the resolution?
Absolutely. Proclamation National Principals Month, October 2020. Whereas each year the month of October is designated National Principals Month in recognition of principals, assistant principals, and other school administrators for their steadfast commitment to ensuring that every child receives a quality education. And whereas principals and assistant principals are responsible for the day-to-day operation of their school, which includes leading the instructional program, acting as disciplinarians, managing educational initiatives, and building relationships with students, teachers, parents, community partners, and others to achieve excellence. And whereas principals and assistant principals work diligently to establish a positive tone for their school and provide a supportive and safe school environment where students learn, grow, and thrive. And whereas we are very proud of our principals and assistant principals and sincerely appreciate their ongoing efforts to inspire success and a lifetime of learning in Winton Woods City Schools, and also to promote the importance and value of public school education in this community. Now therefore be it resolved that the Winton Woods City School District is pleased to join other boards of education across the United States in proclaiming October 2020 as National Principals Month, and encourages the citizens of Winton Woods City School District to join in the celebration of National Principals Month by thanking all school administrators for the care and concern they show for our children, adopted this 28th day of September 2020.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Board in motion is in order to approve the resolution to recognize October 2020 as National Principals Month.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution, National Principals Month, October 2020, as presented.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call that vote?
Aye.
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 Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is 10.05, which is the resolution to recognize the week of October 19th through the 21st, 2020 as National Bus Safety Month. And Mr. Birdie, would you please read that resolution?
Whereas the Winton Woods City School District Board of Education recognizes the critical and important role that bus drivers are entrusted with on a daily basis, and whereas the Winton Woods City School District Board of Education commends the dedication of these drivers who provide safe transportation for the students and staff members of our district, and whereas bus drivers demonstrate a positive role model to reinforce the importance of education and support for family, schools, and community, and whereas the Winton Woods City School District Board of Education, as a stakeholder in the educational development of these children, expresses its appreciation and support for the drivers and staff of the Winton Woods Transportation Department. Now therefore be it resolved that the Winton Woods City School District Board of Education proclaims the week of October 19th to the 23rd, 2020 to be a week of sincere appreciation for the important role of the staff of the Transportation Department of our school district.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. Board, a motion is in order to approve the resolution to recognize the week of October 19th through the 23rd, 2020 as National School Bus Safety Week.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution of National School Bus Safety Week, October 19th through 23rd, 2020, as presented.
I second it.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you call the vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. The next item on the agenda is the Board of Education reports. And we have 11.01 legislative reports. In Dr. Johnson's absence, Mr. Smith, will you please provide that report?
Yes, Madam President. I'd like for everyone to stay tuned with House Bill 197. The High Court dismisses school voucher lawsuit. The Ohio Supreme Court on Thursday dismissed a legal challenge that attempted to force the state to accept and process applications for a private school voucher program. The legal challenge followed the legislature's passage of Senate Bill 120, shifting the start of the Ed Choice Scholarship Program application window from February to April. So they're still out pushing the envelope, trying to get Ed Choice passed, and there is a stalemate at this point, but please stay tuned to House Bill 197. The next one that's very important is the school board's anti-racism resolution draws criticism. The State Board of Education rescheduled a training Tuesday on equity, discrimination, and implicit bias called for an anti-racism resolution passed early this year in order to hear from several presenters who wanted to address the board with concerns about the resolution and topics like the Black Lives Matter movement. I would encourage every member in the district to look at the information called Project 1619. It won a Pulitzer Prize, but you need to stay tuned to figure out all the essential pieces. And I know our history teachers are very, very aware, but Project 1619 will give you an eye-opening about some of these issues based on implicit bias and racism. And then the final one would be school absenteeism may lead to long-term consequences for adults. How many of you are familiar with the Crane Center at Ohio State University? The most incredible research-based center for early childhood and policy. Children who miss a lot of school from kindergarten to 8th grade may suffer unexpected costs as young adults, new research from Ohio State University suggests. Researchers found that those who are more regularly absent in these early years of school were less likely to vote, reported having greater economic difficulties, and had poor educational outcomes when they were 22 to 23 years old. The results suggest early school absenteeism should be taken more seriously. And the author of the study, the assistant professor of human sciences at Ohio State, has actually said that there's a misconception, especially among parents, that it doesn't matter if kids miss school early on, that it only becomes important when they get to middle or high school. This is based on the research, and you guys can read it. There are incredible white papers that support the idea that students need to come to school. If we're seeing negative outcomes of absenteeism in largely middle-class sample, remember, this was not a sample for students with disabilities. This was not a sample for students that are socioeconomically challenged. This is from middle-class America. In 2020, parents may be wondering how widespread school closings during the pandemic may be affecting their children. These really are unprecedented times, as we know. All kids are absent. With that said, the differential access to supports and resources will likely result in even greater variability and outcomes when students return to school after the pandemic. The study says that parents need to be more aware of the importance of school attendance, even in young children. So the study, again, was for middle-class America. You can read some of the information about students returning and being part of a school system. Many of my colleagues have been studying this for a while, and I can tell you we don't know the outcomes of what's going to happen when students are 22 and 23 years old, but the information is very, very just staggering. It's really a negative process that we have to figure out how to make sure kids are in school safe, how to make sure the adults are in school safe, because let's face it, everybody in this room, your future is already here. You are already living your dream, okay? Or your nightmare, depending on how you see it. But children are trying to figure out, how do I become that special thing in life? And you're guiding them in a way that you are actually their lifeline to the future. So that's why the absenteeism piece is being discussed all over the state of Ohio, and I'm sure other states will join in very, very soon. So that's the end of the legislative piece.
I'd like to just also add, I'm very, they say that organizations are perfectly designed for the outcome that they want to have, and I'm glad that we do have a truancy area within our organization to help with chronic absenteeism and look out for some of the students who might fall into this category. The next item on the agenda is 11.02, and Mr. Birdie, do you have any information you'd like to share with us?
I did send reports out to everybody yesterday by email. Included in that email were updates by Mr. Harry Snyder from Great Oaks. Their blended learning opportunity is apparently going well so far. In one of his updates, he provided a flyer from the Hamilton County Educational Service Center where any active school board member could attend a conference, and they're going to cover understanding the 5-year forecast. So it's in that email that I sent to all of you if you're interested in doing that. I believe it's October 14th. Not sure what time.
Is it virtual?
I think it is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to sign up. They'll give you a link
Okay.
to get into the conference. And then there's an ACTE legislative update, another legislative update. And we had 2 students from Winton Woods at Scarlet Oak that were included in the Students in the Spotlight. They received citizenship awards, and I'm going to try these names. Cesario Robinson, who's a digital arts and design student, and Gustavo Grostieta, an auto refinishing student. And that concludes my report.
Mr. Birdie, I have a question. Can you tell us a little bit about the blended approach at Scarlett, and any idea how many students you're talking about?
Actually, it should be all of the students.
Okay.
For the most part, they're all going 2 days a week. They're doing it a little bit differently than what we've decided to do it, and I could argue the benefits, I think, of both methods.
Yes, sir.
They have students coming on Monday and Thursday, or Tuesday and Friday, with Wednesday off as a virtual day to take care of other things that need to be taken care of. So Harry says it's going well so far. This is last update was on September 9th, so we'll be going back to another meeting.
How many weeks in session? How many weeks in session?
They started, I'm going to get the date wrong, but I believe it was the beginning of September.
It's okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. The next item on the agenda is the Board of Education motions and recognitions and recommendations. 12.02 is the appointment of the delegate for the OSBA 2020 Capital Conference. At the beginning of our organizational meeting, we appointed Dr. Johnson, but in her absence, I was actually the backup, so I will be appointed to attend the conference and as the delegate, and Mr. Birdie has agreed to be the backup. So thank you, Mr. Birdie, for volunteering to doing that, just in case I can't. Are there any questions about the Capitol Conference? And Mr. Seymour, can you please make sure that all the board members receive the information so they can decide if they want to attend?
Absolutely, but this year's been so unique. I haven't received anything yet, but it'll
Okay.
all be virtual.
I will.
So I'll reach out to you at the work session on who's planning to attend. And then I would assume you'll get your schedule, and all the session links will be there, and they'll probably email you directly that. But we'll find out more later.
Yeah, I actually just got a flyer from them today in the mail at home. So.
Yeah, and that question came up in the Urban Network. The individuals wanted to go to the OSBA conference, but they hadn't received any information, so I wasn't sure if you had, so that's good. We can all check our emails to see if if we have an appetite for any of the sessions online, and if you do want to attend that conference, please reach out to Mr. Seymour, and he can, like he said, he'll give us more information. The next item on the agenda is comments from the members of the Board of Education and the Superintendent and Treasurer. Mr. Seymour, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't know if anyone else was going to cover it, but aren't you surprised I have something to say today?
I am absolutely flabbergasted.
I wanted
Go
to
ahead.
recognize Mrs. Mary Pennycuff, who passed away, the wife of Mr. Pennycuff, who served 25 years on the Board of Education and continues to support this district through operating levies and through the music department. And I just thought the Warrior family, anybody who works at Winton Woods knows the Pennycuffs, and it was very sad to see that happen, and I just wanted to make a comment because he's been so great to me since I arrived to the district, so.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Definitely, our hearts go out to the Pennycuff family, so thank you for recognizing that. Mr. Birdie.
Just real quickly, thank you to all the teachers for what you all do on a daily basis. We know that this transition is going to be difficult, and everybody's going to need to have patience. I think it's not going to be, we'd love to go smoothly every day, every minute, and everything work perfectly. Use your resources, whatever they are, your principals, other staff members that can help you with any issues that you come up with. you know, obviously your safety is important to us as well as the safety of our students and our community. We want to thank the anonymous donor that was on the list. I don't think we talked about it at first, that donated masks to the district. I think sorry, I missed that. Yeah, was it like 1,000 masks? So that was nice. You know, unfortunately, with what we're going through, and as was highlighted by was it LJB? You know, what we're going through right now isn't something that anybody's got experience with really dealing with that's alive today. So in person. So this is where there's no perfect answer on when to start and how to do this. So, you know, just we're asking for everybody's patience, and we truly appreciate everything that you all do on a daily basis. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. Mr. McGowan?
You know, we're facing some unprecedented times, and just like Mr. Birdie said, I want to thank the staff and the teachers for everything that they're doing, and also reiterate what Madam Vice President Ms. Ruggles said about when we approved those 3 plans. It was a lot of deliberation and consideration about, you know, which way to go, and we took into consideration everything we heard from the teachers, from the staff, from the community, and what we did was try to go with what we felt was going to be the most safe recommendation for the students and also the staff. And those decisions were very difficult, and like Mr. Smith said, I was the guy that said until we get all the way to the yellow, we shouldn't do anything. And that's when he let me know we've never been in yellow. So, but we did take into consideration everything. We want to make sure that everybody stays safe, and we appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Dr. Cupoletti?
Yes, I want to thank Mr. Denny and LJB for their presentation. I have had many concerns because of the nature of what we're going through, and some of those concerns were brought up and discussed and gave me some comfort that the school district is doing a lot to mitigate the danger, because we will have danger, and anything we can do to help is really good. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, Madam Vice President, I've had the pleasure of, we made a lot of assumptions that we believe in our inherent right about being educators, that staff members care about kids, and it's just something that we believe. And I would like to say that I've had the pleasure of having over 40 focus groups with staff, and they love kids, absolutely to their core. They sacrifice every day to come in and do things for their families, where their families are still, you know, at home. But the commitment that the teachers and the staff and the bus drivers and food servers and maintenance people are making to make sure this district is safe. Again, we could have sent out a survey to say, how do you feel? But having those conversations face to face has been the most incredible experience that I've ever had, and I applaud them for being honest, taking into consideration about their own family's well-being, but coming every single day, giving the students the love that they deserve. I appreciate the staff at Winton Woods City Schools, and I am proud to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I echo everything that was said here, but I'd also like to add, when I first ran for the board, one of the things as a parent, I felt that the community engagement needed to be improved. And I have to say that the community engagement and understanding, trying to understand what the teachers need, what they want, and wanting to hear from them, as well as the staff and the parents, so that we can try and make the best decision. And I can tell you that those surveys were very helpful in us making our decisions. I don't doubt that our teachers and our staff love our children. I know it. That is part of being Warrior Nation. But just know we want to be able to continue to have those dialogues so we can make the best decisions on behalf of our students and families. Also, I want to, I have a daughter who's a nurse, and I know this has been a challenging time, so I really appreciate the nurses being identified as someone that needed to be saluted tonight. I think the work that they do is incredible, and given that this is something that took us all by surprise, but I think, looking at our numbers and how we've managed it, not only with the nursing staff, but with the rest of the staff, I think it has been amazing, because some school districts has had some issues, and I'm just really grateful that that has not been the issues that we've had here at Winton Woods. I think it was a very good idea to bring on LJB. Am I saying that right? Is it LJB?
Yes.
LJB, to be a collaborative partner so that we could try and figure our way through something that we have never been through. And the last thing that I want to say, I want to remind everyone to vote, to get out there and vote, and encourage your families to vote. I think that's it. Oh, and congratulations to the Winton Woods football team. They beat Anderson on Friday, and I know that is a huge step in a huge accomplishment for our athletic team. There's a young lady by the name of Deja Thomas, who's also a soccer goalie. She is amazing, and she is bringing me out to watch her play. She is actually broke the oh, don't say it.
We're recognizing her
Okay.
like next month.
All right, well, just look out, So anyways, that's all that I have to say tonight. So we'll move on to item 14.01, the executive session. And board, there is not a need for an executive session, so we can move to item 15, which is calling the meeting to adjournment. So thank you very much for coming out, and we appreciate seeing so many teaching faces here with us tonight. And meeting adjourned.